Am I wrong for telling my friend I don't want to be her bridesmaid anymore? My friend Mary and I have known each other since we were children. We've grown apart over the past few years, but she still considers me important enough to make me a bridesmaid. Her wedding is set to be in 3 weeks. One reason why I sort of distanced myself from her was because of her treatment of my relationship. My boyfriend Jack and I have been together for 3.5 years. He's a wonderful person and there is no doubt in my mind that this is the man I want to marry. But Mary is under the impression that Jack is too good for me. Jack comes from a very wealthy background. His parents are certainly very wealthy. He was practically guaranteed a lavish life from the moment that he left the womb. I grew up in a low-income neighborhood, often wondering where my next meal was or how I was going to help pay the bills at a young age. Jack is considered to be conventionally attractive, always looking like he should be on some sort of magazine or billboard. Jack's good looks and background have led Mary to believe that Jack deserves better than me, as according to her, there's no way I could have pulled someone so attractive and rich. It's pretty disheartening to hear those things constantly, and it does take a toll on you and the friendship. Whenever Jack is around, she's quite polite and respectful, never once making these comments. Eventually, the comments did stop. Mary invited me for lunch with her fiancé and his friend Gary. From the moment I arrived, Mary and her fiancé were consumed in their own conversation, paying no attention to the both of us. It was fine, as Gary seemed to be a great guy and we easily chatted. He asked me why I was single, and I told him that I was in a happy, committed relationship. He was very taken aback by my answer. He told me that Mary had set up a blind double date of sorts for the both of us. I was very confused and slightly angry. I didn't want to be confrontational at lunch, especially in public, so I just carried on with the lunch. Luckily, Gary wasn't upset and ended up making a few jokes about the whole ordeal. I called Mary later on in the day and asked her a ton of questions about why she thought it was okay to do that. At first, she tried to deny it, but then she tried to justify it by saying that Gary is a man who's more in my league, and since he was also a groomsman, we needed to get to know each other better. I was shocked at her bluntness, so I just told her that I didn't want to be her bridesmaid anymore. Granted, it was a pretty impulsive decision, but I still stand by it. Mary didn't take it well, trying to apologize and saying that it was a mistake. It's been a few days and her fiancé has been texting me, asking me to suck it up for the wedding. I feel petty and conflicted right now. So, am I wrong for what I did?
I have a best friend named Tina who I've known most of my life. We've had a strong friendship from middle school all the way until we graduated from the same college. We've always been there for each other and I tell her pretty much everything. Back in junior year of high school, a guy named Rod sexually assaulted me at a house party. He never apologized for it and it put me in a deep downward spiral to the point where I almost wanted to drop out in order to never see his face again. I told Tina about it and she did everything she could to support me. Fast forward to early 2020. Tina and her boyfriend Josh announced that they were getting engaged and Tina wanted me to be the maid of honor. I was beyond excited to do it. We've always talked about being each other's maids of honor. There was another detail though. Josh had a similar friendship history with his best man and they thought it would be adorable if the maid of honor and best man worked together on everything and were their own second package on the wedding day. I guess it was their way of making us feel a little more excited for weddings of our own. I found out that the best man was going to be Rod and he and Josh remained best friends after high school. I thought Rod was just in the friend group, but it turns out that they're as close as could be. My heart sunk and I simply didn't know how to respond. They expected us to work together and be together the whole wedding process, and that sounded like literal hell. I started to think about whether Tina ever told Josh or that Josh heard and just didn't care. All I know is that I was having second thoughts about the wedding after that. I texted Tina about my concerns with Rod coming in the most polite way possible, and she sent me this. I know about what happened with you guys back in the day, but Rod seems like a great guy now. It would just really mean a lot if you could just push that memory away for the duration of this. Please, just trust me. I don't know how to respond to this, and luckily the wedding planning process has been at a halt since COVID. I haven't responded to her since that text, but now this has really been bugging me. If I say no, it would probably break her heart, but I just don't know if I can handle working with my rapist. Am I wrong for not wanting to work with him during her wedding? I finally replied to Tina with, I've had time to think about it and I just can't be your maid of honor anymore. It's so hurtful that you're telling me to pack up my trauma for who knows how long until your wedding day. I just can't do it. I don't think I'll come at all knowing that he's going to be there. I'm sorry. An hour later, I get a call from Josh. He asked me what's going on with me and Tina and that she was extremely upset. A part of me snapped and I said, I don't know, what's going on with you making someone who raped me your best man? He was confused and I repeated myself. He was silent for a few seconds and then asked if he could come over. I was a little wary of the idea, but I said sure. He comes to my apartment 40 minutes later without Tina. Tina had told Josh that the reason I wasn't coming to the wedding was that I didn't want to work with Rod, because I had a crush on him, and that she was forcing the relationship too much. So basically, she said that we had a petty girl fight. My jaw hit the floor and I was fuming. She had obviously never told Josh what Rod did to me. I shared that Rod had raped me back in high school and that Tina knew about it. I asked if he knew too. He said he didn't, but at one point Rod did mention a few crazy bitches falsely accused him of rape senior year. This obviously didn't include me since I only told Tina and a few family members. Josh believed him at the time, but I guess after hearing me say it, it's starting to dawn on him that his friend was a liar. I could see on Josh's face and body language that the realization really weighed down on him and I felt bad. He thanked me for telling him and left. I was expecting an angry text to come from Tina and sure enough, I got it at like midnight. She went off saying that I'm gonna end up destroying their marriage, how I could do that to her, etc, etc. I just pressed the block button and went to bed. I'm gonna try to connect with other friends and try to move on from this. If I'm feeling brave enough, I might try to find these crazy bitches and see if we can make a case against Rod. When I was around 13, my friend Sally and I were having a sleepover. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, which is what I think drew me to her at first. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. Her family was pretty religious and wouldn't let us watch horror movies, so we ended up watching Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I were hanging out in a room, listening to music and giving each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than what we really were. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my bestie at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She also had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. She showed me some texts between her and a guy that she was talking to, which mostly consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him and the usual online creep stuff. According to him, he was 19. However, looking at the picture that he sent, this man was clearly at least 40 and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Suddenly, we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation and I heard him say, "You're so pretty, why don't you come meet me?" Sally said she couldn't because she was spending the night with her friend. This sparked his interest. That's when he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. She planned for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet this creep in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go, but Sally adamantly pleaded, saying that she didn't feel safe going by herself, so I agreed. We took our phones and I stuffed a kitchen knife in my bra in case something went wrong. The route we took was dark and deserted. When we got to the parking lot, we saw a beat-up Toyota Corolla. From what I could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out and left the door open behind him as he approached us. I turned on my flash to see and I could tell he was on something. His eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. I suddenly became conscious of how big he was. He was about 6'2" and around 280 pounds. Sally and I were both significantly smaller than him. That's when he reached down and grabbed Sally by the arm. His friends got out of the car and he invited us back to the car for booze and drugs. I quickly took my knife out and when he saw it, he released her. I pulled Sally by the arm and ran faster than I ever had in my life. When we got to her home, we locked the doors, closed the blinds, and didn't sleep all night as we peeked out the window in case they followed us. To our dismay, this same Toyota was circling around her apartment building not once, not twice, but 3 times. After this, Sally and I stopped talking because she was mad at me for ruining her night. However, I think it was for the best. Storytime about how one best friend saved me from the other. The school I went to was a public school that never cared or paid attention to things that went on unless it was brought up to the school board directly. It was sophomore year of high school and I had class with both my girl and boy best friend. The girl's name is Aspen and the guy's name is Nick. Since our teacher didn't care, all 3 of us picked our seats together. I sat in the middle between Nick and Aspen. Nick and I had known each other since kindergarten, so I was pretty comfortable with his company. I never thought anything of it when he leaned his head on my shoulder or squished my face with his hands. However, about halfway through the year, things started to take a turn. During class, Nick would put his hands on my thighs or he'd lean on me and wrap his arms around my waist. This started to make me feel uncomfortable. We were seated in the back of the class, so no one noticed him making me uncomfortable except Aspen, who had no idea what was happening because I never alarmed her of it. I didn't say anything because part of me thought I was overreacting. After all, he was my best friend. One day, the class was empty because it was a free day, so we could all just hang out in the classroom or the commons. The teacher was God knows where, and Aspen had left to go print something for a different class in the printing room. I was left alone in the back of the classroom with Nick. For a few minutes, things were fine. I knew that Aspen would be back, so I just read my book. Then out of nowhere, I saw Nick stand up and shut the classroom door. I was scared when Nick shut the classroom door, but I tried to ignore him and pretended to keep reading my book. I quickly dialed Aspen's number on my phone and slipped the phone into my pocket. Before long, Nick got impatient with me and ordered me to take off my shirt. I told him no, and that's when he grabbed a fistful of my hair and tried to do it himself. After a minute of struggling with him, Aspen busted through the classroom door with one of our school guidance counselors. Turns out she hadn't really gone to the print room. She had noticed Nick touching me inappropriately and making me uncomfortable the previous day, so she went to the guidance counselor to get help. When I dialed her number, she was trying to convince the counselor, and when she realized what was happening, she put the phone on speaker to prove that I was in an unsafe situation. The counselor took Nick away, and later I found out that 7 other girls had come forward about him. They all said that he was harassing them, but since the school had no evidence, they couldn't expel him before. However, since the school counselor heard what was going on when Aspen put the phone on speaker during his attack on me, they were able to finally expel him. I'll always be thankful to Aspen for trying to help me when I felt like I couldn't do anything. I was basically an accident. When I was born, my 5 siblings were already in their late teens to early 20s, and my parents were both 46. I was never abused in my childhood, but I was neglected and my entire family resented me. My parents didn't think they'd get pregnant again, but here we are. I was never looked after for by anyone and basically had to raise myself. No one ever played with me, spent time with me, or anything. They never bought me anything significant, it was always hand-me-downs. I realized this as I got older and I focused on myself. I thought that something was wrong with me because my siblings all received love and attention, so if I improved myself and did things for them, maybe they'd accept and love me too. I always got the best grades, made sure I did all my chores, always kept my room clean, and so on. However, nothing I did was ever good enough for them. We celebrated my father's birthday yesterday. My siblings and my mom wouldn't be around until we went out for dinner, so it was just me and him. I cooked him breakfast and lunch, did all the chores, and bought him a tie. I'm only 16 and on a budget. The most he came up with was a pathetic thank you. I could tell he wanted me to leave him alone, so I did. Finally, we all went out to dinner and they all had a good time while I sat in the corner ignored. This is how it usually is. When we got home, I broke down and started crying in front of them. I don't know what triggered it, but I started crying. Maybe it was because of them being so happy together. When they asked me what happened, I just blew up at them and told them how I felt about my entire childhood. I told them how they never showed me any kind of love or affection, among other things. I ended up by saying I wish they had aborted me if they hate me so much, or could have given me up for adoption so they could live their lives without me. My oldest sister started to say something, but I ran up to my room, closed the door, and went to sleep listening to music as they knocked on my door. When I faced my family the next day, the first thing they all did was give me a big hug, which honestly surprised me. It was the first time in years they showed me any affection. They also prepared me food, and after eating, we all talked. My oldest nephew, who was 2 years younger than me, stumbled across my post and showed it to my sister. They all apologized for how they treated me. They confirmed that I was an accident and none of them wanted to deal with another baby, so I messed up everything. But they didn't word it like that. Their reasoning was that I always did so well in life, so they were able to ignore me and pretend like I wasn't there, basically. They said they would do their best from now on to make me feel as part of the family. I thought about it long and hard and decided I'll try to form some kind of bond with them if it's even possible. Mainly, I'm going to live for myself and work towards my future. Storytime about the ghost that follows me. When I was in my teens, my cousin and best friend made a Ouija board. I was skeptical whether it worked or not, but agreed to try it out with her. We get everything set up and my cousin starts asking the board questions. It starts answering and saying weird things that my cousin didn't even know about my life. Some of my deepest and darkest secrets were coming out of that thing. I started to panic and I told my cousin that I wanted to stop. We said our goodbyes and closed it up. I thought that was the end of it, but that night, we started hearing footsteps in her room. This was something that neither of us had experienced in that room ever. When I went home, the footsteps followed me and continued to happen to my childhood home. When I told my parents, my dad chalked it up to the floor settling after we laid new flooring in the previous years. Then we moved into a new home that had been converted from a garage to a business to a home of my family. I mention this because 1, no one had clearly ever lived there, and 2, the floors under the carpet and laminate were cement. However, the laminate would still creak as if a full-grown adult was walking on it. Shortly after, I moved into my ex's apartment and same thing. The footsteps again, but this time, shadows started appearing. It had gotten so bad that my best friend and roommate, who's a major skeptic, didn't want to be there alone. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did. I eventually moved out of the apartment. I moved in with my mother and sister in a different city. Her duplex went from no paranormal activity to an insane amount in just a few days. They would feel hot breaths on their face at night when they slept. My aunt started hearing giggling in a different room when she was alone, and I even heard someone say in an eerily tone, "Mommy," at 3 in the morning once. However, the craziest part is that the duplex mysteriously caught fire. When the fire department came and did their investigation, they had no explanation as to how the fire started or what caused it. After that, we moved into a new modular home who only had one previous owner. The footsteps started again. I found a pretty doll at an antique store, and eventually the doll started to move around on its own. There were times I caught it wave at me or move its head. It got to the point that I had to hide it away because it moved so much and it scared me so badly. I recently moved into an apartment in my hometown and the footsteps are here now. Things keep getting moved around too. I'm seeing the shadows again and it feels like I'll never be free of this thing. I don't know what to do, but I'm scared and terrified it'll always follow me. My boyfriend and I have been together for 5 years. We went to the same university, and after graduation, I started my catering business in our hometown. He got into computer systems and we've both worked hard towards our careers. Everything seemed to be going great for us when my boyfriend came home one day and told me that he got a promotion. I was excited for him until he said that the position was in another state. He told me the pay is almost triple what he's making now and he doesn't feel like he could pass it up. However, I've worked hard the last few years on my catering business in this city. I've got a ton of big clients who regularly order and business is booming for me. Obviously, I'm going to have doubts about moving to another state and starting from scratch. This would also put me in a financially stressful situation as my income would plummet until I planted roots in a new state with new clientele. I told him I wasn't sure if I'm comfortable moving and how it would impact my business. He assured me that he would take care of everything for us, including all the bills and any extra spending costs I needed for myself or my business. This sounded slightly better, but I was still torn. Over the last 5 years, we've talked a few times about the future, and he knows that I want more of a commitment eventually, but I've never tried to force him into it. That's when I brought up the topic of marriage and told him that I like some sort of commitment if I'm going to uproot my life for him. However, he didn't react well to this and things got intense. I told my boyfriend that I needed some sort of commitment to start from scratch in another state. I explained to him how big of a change this would be for me and my business. This is when I mentioned the topic of marriage. I asked him that if I was to show him my commitment to his career with this move, how he would feel about committing to me with what I wanted. I told him I wouldn't rush him into marriage, but I would want the promise of it. He told me that he didn't feel comfortable with marriage and that he wasn't interested in it. That's when he said that the promise of taking care of us and my business costs should be enough for me to make the commitment to move. I disagreed because there's no telling how my business would do in another location, and it's taken me years to build it up to what it is now. We got into a heated argument and decided that we both need time to figure this out. I talked to my mom and sister about it, who sided with him, saying that the financial commitment he made to my business to start over is enough. However, now that I've had a few days to think, I'm wondering if he'll ever want to get married. Marriage is important to me, and he's known this early on in our relationship. He always told me that it would come in its own time, but it's been 5 years and I feel like he's not even remotely thinking about it. I'm torn and I don't know what to do. Am I wrong for not wanting to uproot my life and business for him without the commitment of marriage? This is why you might not want to move in with your best friend. After graduating high school, my bestie of 9 years and I decided to move in together. We both loved the same things, hung out nearly every day, and at the time I couldn't think of any reason why it wouldn't work out. When we first moved in, I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship that ended in assault. I sat her down and set some boundaries while explaining my reasons for them. The most important was no sleepovers. I didn't care if she slept with her boyfriend, but I didn't want him staying over, and if it was needed after a night of drinking or something, then she'd give me warnings so I'd be able to make preparations for myself. At first, things were fine, but shortly after she had a messy breakup with her boyfriend, it was a downward spiral. She brought over a different guy every night. I hit my breaking point when she brought over 7 guys in one day and then disappeared for 3 days with one of them while ignoring my texts and phone calls. She kept blowing me off, so I disconnected the Netflix and all other streaming services that I provided. This is when she finally talked to me. I let her know that I didn't feel safe in my own apartment and that it either needed to end or I'd be moving out. I didn't like sleeping with my door locked and afraid to use the restroom at night. She agreed, but little did I know it was about to get 100 times worse when she got a new boyfriend who had it out for me. A few months after renewing our lease, we both started dating new guys. Hers seemed nice at first, but that illusion of kindness quickly dissolved. We lived on a smoke-free campus and he constantly smoked on our balcony. When I told him he couldn't do that or we'd get a fine, he told me to shut the F up. I was shocked. Around Christmas, he got evicted from his apartment and my roommate told him he could stay with us without even consulting me. He said it would only be until the beginning of the year and he'd paid a third of the bills. However, he didn't hold up to any of that. He laid around all day, eating my food, using my Netflix, and so on. When I texted my bestie about it, she told me it wasn't her problem and to confront him. I served him a 30-day notice and told him I'd take him to court if he didn't leave. He left that day and my bestie went with him while still paying rent at our place. 6 months later, they were back. He was pissed and began fat-shaming me, loudly wondering why my boyfriend was willing to date a whale like me. When I left him a note asking him to stop eating my food, he wrote, "Just trying to help you out with your diet," with a well sticker. The last straw was when I came home and he was picking my lock. Apparently, they'd both gotten into hard drugs and were pawning things off. I called my boyfriend and family and within a few days I was all moved out. I found out later they got evicted. I haven't talked to her since.